अब कॉन्टेक्स्ट ऑफ इकोनॉमिक रिफॉर्म तो इकोनॉमिक क्राइसिस ही है ना. It was essentially crisis. So basically it was economic crisis or crisis of Indian economy basically is the context of economic reforms. अच्छा, crisis भी है, कुछ और reason भी होंगे. What is contributing to, let's write, what all is contributing to economic crisis? What has contributed to economic crisis? First and foremost, import liberalization under Rajiv Gandhi government or regime, you can say. Other reason of economic crisis was loan waiver, farmers के लिए loan waiver by VP Singh. That was a National Front government. Increasing fiscal deficit तो उनकी वजह से हुआ. Another reason why economic crisis happened was increasing fiscal deficit. Also was the implementation of fifth, though this is politically not very important, implementation of fifth pay commission report. But ये point बहुत important नहीं है. You can leave this also if you don't want to. Then other reason for crisis would be rising oil import bill. Rising oil import bill is happening because of Gulf crisis. Gulf crisis 1989 कुवैत पे इराक ने अटैक कर दिया ना, तो उसका एक मेजर फॉल आउट था. उसमें Chandrasekhar government had sent Rajiv Gandhi as a peace ambassador to Baghdad. Rajiv Gandhi went as a peace ambassador to Baghdad just 2-3 months before he was assassinated. I think that was the most tragic incident in the political history of India, is assassination of Rajiv Gandhi. Then increasing fiscal deficit also because of the underperformance of the government not able to generate as much income or profits out of public sector enterprise. And although reforms were already introduced, but that will also be one of the reasons. But the major reason would be these only. Just in general, right, increasing fiscal and revenue deficit, though many of these points are related to revenue and fiscal deficit itself. Then because of when the crisis started to emerge, there was a flight of international capital also. Flight of capital, of course, not in that big way, but still by the NRIs. NRIs had withdrawn basically from India. Now, the context is economic reforms, of course, and along with economic reforms, in the context, we will also add to the, this is not the reason, but it will inspire economic reforms. So reforms initiated in China. China had already started economic reforms a decade before India under which leader? Who was the leader? Deng Xiaoping. Under Deng Xiaoping? नहीं, माओ जेडोंग के टाइम पे तो कल्चरल रेवोल्यूशन हुआ था. दैट वाज नॉट रिफॉर्म. पहले तो रेवोल्यूशन हुआ मेन 49 वाला कम्युनिस्ट रेवोल्यूशन, उसका तो लीडर माओ था ना, माओ जेडोंग. एंड देन माओ आल्सो स्टार्टेड टू ब्रिंग इन द कल्चरल रेवोल्यूशन, which was a transformation in the society, and so that they are more ideologically committed, right, towards their aims and objectives. So that all happened in 60s. अच्छा, इसमें चाइना में एक वो भी इंसिडेंट, इफ यू नो, Tiananmen Square incident, you have heard of? 1989 में चाइना प्रो डेमोक्रेसी एक्सप्रेशन था वो. It's a result of this reform which started in late 1970s. One decade of economic reforms led people to express themselves more openly. Read something about it, Tiananmen Square incident. Then also Dr. Manmohan Singh. No, Manmohan Singh, of course, is an important factor. But what Dr. Manmohan Singh was doing was he was studied East Asian miracle. East Asian countries का भी rise हुआ ना, Southeast Asian countries. They were also rising. Those वहाँ भी economic reform, which was studied by Dr. Manmohan Singh. Studied East Asian miracle, that is economic reforms in East Asia, at South Commission. The South Commission is an organization in Geneva basically for, South-South cooperation. Acha, you still you haven't discussed this, no? In new international economic order yet. There will be one session on this. South-South cooperation may, like the global South, no? Countries of the South, instead of having to do with the countries of the North or South, क्या होता है international relations में? What is North and South? North is the developed countries. South are the developing countries. So instead of North-South dialogue, they started focusing on South-South cooperation. उसकी वजह से they had established this organization called as South-South Commissions based in Geneva. So वहाँ पे Dr. Manmohan Singh was part of this. He was studying this East Asian miracle. So he already knew what all is to be required to be done for India. And Narasimha Rao knew all this, that he had done all these studies also. That's why he asked, there's a story of this, when Dr. Manmohan Singh ko bola gaya ki you are accidental prime minister. There's a book written by Sanjay Baru, Accidental Prime Minister, because he became prime minister by accident, because Sonia Gandhi could not become. So what he replied, Dr. Manmohan Singh said that I'm not only accidental prime minister, I'm also accidentally finance minister. Finance minister also, he was made accidentally, that he got a call from Narasimha Rao asking him to come and take the dress up and come for the oath taking ceremony directly. And he did not take him seriously. He thought that ये कुछ joke कर रहा है मेरे साथ. So he didn't take it seriously. वो जा ही नहीं रहे थे. But then someone told him to take it seriously, and then he went to take the oath. This is how he became the finance minister. And then, of course, the IMF bail package, right? This IMF bail package is actually part of the Washington Consensus, the structural adjustment program of IMF and the World Bank. So there's a international context to it. And then, of course, why economic reforms could happen for us, the most important reason for us is the political reason. Politically क्यों हुआ? एक तो international politics, you see how it is involved, that we have already seen. But domestic politics में ऐसा क्या था economic reforms हुआ? Is because your opposition parties themselves had created all the mess like this. And they, whatever, the negative fallouts of the good things which Rajiv Gandhi, see, any time you will make the policy, it will have a positive side, it will have a negative impact also. But you should have the courage to fight against those negative aspects. When this negative impact of those positive policies, they started to come, the stable government was not there to face it. And neither VP Singh nor Chandrasekhar showed any courage, because they themselves were not very sure about their presence in the government for a long time. So they could not take up any courage, and they could not take strong decisions which was required. So opposition was itself, the legitimacy of the opposition as a force was already down. Are you getting it? The opposing force, but one more interesting thing is there. One more interesting, and this is actually interesting. 1991 ke elections mein, imagine the political change that has happened just before economic reform is to start. In those elections of 1991, BJP has emerged as the single largest opposition party. Right? The main opposition party is the BJP now. So they could have opposed the reforms, but they were not in the condition of opposing the reforms. I think at that point of time, BJP has done a very good job by keeping the national interest at the forefront. And Narasimha Rao and BJP, they were like hands in gloves on many issues, for good thing and for not so good thing also. Though they will not express it, but still. I mean, the demolition of Babri Masjid is also one of the hands in gloves policies of these governments. Otherwise, it would not have happened. But we will say that the weak opposition also, and also the opposition was not only weak, the opposition was also not very expressive because of national interest. Because of the nature of economic crisis is such that opposition parties were not in position to oppose. Opposition parties not in position to oppose. And more than that, whom they would have criticized the most? You know what? Had Rajiv Gandhi been alive, he would have been criticized a lot for the economic crisis. He would have been criticized, though he was not responsible as such, but he was mostly criticized then, because they will always say that this is all the fallout of the policies of the government in this second half of 1980s. But I mean, I won't say this, that Rajiv Gandhi's absence from the political scene also could keep the opposition under check. Because had Rajiv Gandhi been there, then the opposition parties would have said they would have blamed it on the Congress. It is your making that there is economic crisis. But then Congress, the good thing for Congress has happened, what has happened is that there were regimes in between also. VP Singh and Chandrasekhar was also there. Now whom to blame? Because there's a quick changes in the government, right? So you cannot blame anyone. This is another reason why the opposition parties they could not say much or oppose it politically. But more than that, more important reason is that in the national interest, because of this crisis, it was required a strong political support across party line was required. You say eve of economic reforms in India. एक तो crisis है, economic crisis. Then 1991 elections catapulted a minority government. Catapulted a minority government means it basically produced a minority government. This minority government is a weak government, right? Because it doesn't have the majority in the legislature. Narasimha Rao Congress had only 232 seats initially. Then somehow Narasimha Rao managed, howsoever he managed. Let's not get into there. But some support he managed, and then some support came from other parties also. And this is how the government could continue for 5 years. But Narasimha Rao was also seen as someone who was retiring from politics, right? He had already packed his bag. He was going back to his village. And suddenly Rajiv Gandhi was assassinated. Narasimha Rao had written the manifesto of the Congress party for 1991 elections. 1991 elections का first phase हो चुका था. Before the second, between the first and the second phase, Rajiv Gandhi was assassinated. You have any idea of this election of 1991? During the election only, it was in one of the election rallies that he was assassinated, right? So one phase of election was already over, and the manifesto was written by Narasimha Rao. He never knew that I only am going to implement this manifesto. And then he was not actively involved in anything. He wrote the manifesto and he was packing his bag to go back to his village to lead his retired life. Suddenly Rajiv Gandhi was assassinated, and this is how he became the Prime Minister of India afterwards. And he had to implement his own manifesto. And Narasimha Rao was also, I mean, if you will see Narasimha Rao at that point of time when he became the Prime Minister, and afterward there was a big change in his physical well-being also. Because one was not sure as to for how many years is he going to live and all that. So Narasimha Rao, after becoming Prime Minister, he was generally seen as someone who was definitely a intellectual, experienced person, right? But he was not very popular in the party. There were many challenges, and he was seen as a stopgap arrangement. Okay. Rao was seen as stopgap Prime Minister. Stopgap Prime Minister means a temporary arrangement who will be replaced sooner, maybe by someone. So obviously that will also make his position weak. Ek to minority government he is commanding. So the position is quite weak. But Narasimha Rao and his government acted with a lot of pragmatism. There was a political pragmatism that contributed. Political pragmatism. Pragmatism means that the political parties will be shedding their ideologies. Left will not oppose as much it would otherwise oppose economic reforms. You know, we are liberalizing, so left will oppose because this is moving away from socialism, no? So political pragmatism is coming from the government also, from this minority government also. It is coming from Narasimha Rao. Narasimha Rao himself overnight changed from a socialist into a liberal. So he slept at night being socialist. Morning he wakes up and he becomes a liberal capitalist. Because Narasimha Rao, Narasimha Rao himself had drafted the land reforms of Andhra Pradesh in 1970s. And all these years, he had towing down strong socialist line. He was a socialist. And now he is bringing about the biggest transformation that could happen in a socialist system of this economic reforms. This is political pragmatism of Rao. And political pragmatism was also shown by political opposition parties. Also shown by opposition party. 21st June 1991, Rao becomes Prime Minister. Immediately after becoming Prime Minister, he had appoints Dr. MANMOHAN Singh, of course, as Finance Minister, first and foremost. And this itself is a strong factor because Dr. MANMOHAN Singh, he had been advocating, had long been advocating delicensing and reforms. It's not that Dr. Manmohan Singh was not as socialist. He was in favor of reforms for much earlier, from late 1960s itself. He was in favor of more open economy reforms, along with Professor Jagdish Bhagwati. Is another renowned economist who again was more into open market economy. And he also had been advocating for economic reforms from late 1960s. But Dr. Singh had been, in very important positions in the government. He was also the governor of RBI. He was the deputy chairman of the Planning Commission, had been adorning very important positions. And he was the chairman of UGC when he gets this phone call from Mr. Narasimha Rao to come and take the oath as finance minister. He was sitting in the UGC office and he didn't take it seriously, is what he himself has said in one of the press conference. Okay. After this, Rao, then they will have closed door meetings. Closed door meetings with opposition parties. Narasimha Rao had to play the real Kautilya over here. And he played this way he played a good role. Okay, Narasimha Rao there may have been some bloats with respect to his regime overall. Maybe corruption charges, which will not personally against him, but directly, indirectly, and of course, demolition of Babri Masjid, which he has to take the responsibility because he was the prime minister. He had to ultimately, there's an interview also got published. I think it was an interview which was already there, but Wire has published that. You should watch that interview, or maybe I'll share it over the group. Okay, watch that interview of Narasimha Rao. The questions which are asked by, like, the Karan Thapar is known for his interviews, right? Karan Thapar's Modi interview I've seen. Modi's interview, which Modi quit, no? In between, he ran away. What are people doing? Okay, so he himself has taken very strong questions. He asked Narasimha Rao and see that how is he defending that I'm not responsible for demolition of Babri Masjid and all that. I'll share that with you. Okay, so in these closed door meetings, Narasimha Rao will tell about the economic crisis the country is facing, opposition leaders. And the opposition leaders were also leaders could get idea of the crisis from gold being transported, right, as collateral Transported means transported to outside India, right? London basically as collateral for $2.2 billion loan that India got from IMF. अभी आपका कंट्री का गोल्ड बाहर जा रहा है तो of course all the leaders will get worried. This is a big crisis. And Narasimha Rao will also paint more bigger picture, grim picture in front of them to tell them about the crisis. This is how they were like, okay. I mean, though they did oppose, some quarters were opposing it. But what happens next after this? 1st to 3rd of July. You see, within 10 days of him becoming Prime Minister, within 10 days, 1st July to 3rd July 1991, Government of India devalued currency twice. 3 दिन में 2 बार इंडिया की करेंसी को डिवैल्यू किया गया. Devaluation of currency will do what? Devaluation of currency, will it promote exports or not? Devalued means rupee will become cheaper, no? If rupee will become cheaper, then countries outside would like to purchase Indian goods. So Indian exports will increase. Narasimha Rao was the Minister of Industry. Rao himself was Minister for Industry. But this anyhow will come afterwards. Mr. P. Chidambaram was Minister of State for Commerce. Okay. And Mr. Montek Singh Ahluwalia. You know Montek Singh Ahluwalia? You don't know? Okay, Montek Singh Ahluwalia was also Deputy Chairman of the Planning Commission under Dr. MANMOHAN Singh as Prime Minister. He was Commerce Secretary, and A.N. Verma was Principal Secretary to Prime Minister. Principal Secretary to Prime Minister. अब ये लोग का ही रोल है इकोनॉमिक रिफॉर्म्स में. That's why I'm mentioning these people. P. Chidambaram, Narasimha Rao, A.N. Verma, Montek Singh Ahluwalia, and of course Dr. MANMOHAN Singh as Finance Minister. There is a book written by Gurucharan Das, India Unbound. In your leisure time, you can, whenever get time, in between, for your leisure purpose, you can read that book. India Unbound. It's a very good book. In that, one of the chapters, from there only I have sourced all these things, because otherwise the political side is not given anywhere properly. Okay. So now currency has been devalued. So on this basis, Rao asks Chidambaram to cut down export subsidy. वो ये बोल रहे हैं कि एक्सपोर्ट सब्सिडी अब क्यों देना, अब तो करेंसी डिवैल्यू हो गई, तो एक्सपोर्ट तो चीप हो जाएगा ना, तो एक्सपोर्ट तो पे फर्क नहीं आएगा, तो लेट्स रिड्यूस एक्सपोर्ट सब्सिडी, क्योंकि एक्सपोर्ट सब्सिडी को कम करने से क्या होगा, फिस्कल डेफिसिट कम हो जाएगा. Subsidy, if you will reduce any subsidy, the government expenditure will be reduced, no? So fiscal deficit will come down. So he asks Chidambaram to cut down export subsidy so as to lower fiscal deficit. But Chidambaram will say, how can I make this announcement of cutting down export subsidy? I mean, all the industrialists and all these people who are participating in export, they will make a big hue and cry about it. So Chidambaram says, let's do one thing. Let us announce this policy. Let's announce a new trade policy altogether with a reform package. We will label it as a reform package, and we will have this trade policy, and within that itself I will abolish the export subsidies, which was a smart thing to be done. Narasimha Rao agreed. Okay, then Narasimha Rao tells Dr. MANMOHAN Singh, he is a Minister of Industry himself, so, and very smartly he has kept the industry with himself. क्यों इंडस्ट्री अपने पास रखा है? क्योंकि इंडस्ट्रियल लाइसेंस राज हटाना है, लाइसेंस परमिट राज इंडस्ट्री में जो है उसको हटाना है. So he has kept industry with himself so that he could more vocally face any kind of opposition which will come. Announcement of overall trade reform package, right? So we had the new trade policy. This new trade policy, it will cut down trade side of license raj. भाई ट्रेड करने के लिए लाइसेंस चाहिए ना, एक तो आपको इंडस्ट्री लगाने के लिए लाइसेंस चाहिए और ट्रेड के लिए भी लाइसेंस चाहिए था. सो ट्रेड साइड ऑफ लाइसेंस राज वाज कट डाउन. एक तो ये हो गया. आफ्टर दिस राव had worked with Dr. Singh for delicensing on the industry side. Dr. Singh agreed and convinced whom? Convinced reluctant finance ministry officials. So there was some opposition from bureaucrats. Dr. MANMOHAN Singh convinced these people that no, we have to go ahead with industrial delicensing. Now it depends on how the question is asked. I'm just mentioning these things. So you have to pick and choose what is to be written in the answer, right? It's not necessary that you'll write all the details. It's just to give you an idea as to what is happening as the leadership and among the political parties. Okay, so after below this we will write, okay, Dr. Singh, when he is convinced. And so we also are trying to bring in factors over here. There was a bureaucratic reluctance, right? Bureaucrats are not easily agreeing for these risks. So some opposition did come from the bureaucracy, but not much. 24th of July is a historic date for India, 1991. I think this is the most important date in Indian, one of the most important dates in Indian history. It's 24th July 1991, when in the morning, new industrial policy announced, which had cut down the license permit raj in a big way. In fact, before this, there was a meeting at Rao's residence. This has been described by Mr. Gurucharan Das pretty well as to what happened in that meeting. In the evening, one of the evenings, these people, Mr. Chidambaram, Dr. Ahluwalia, and MANMOHAN Singh, they were there. They reached Narasimha Rao's home and they were sitting all together. And what Gurucharan Das said, that within few hours, thousands of miles of red tape was cut down by their decisions. In that meeting, they took all those decisions of cutting down the license permit raj. This is how the license permit raj goes. Morning, the new trade policy was announced in India, and that very day in the evening, budget was presented. You know that in India, we used to have the budget earlier in the evening. And in this budget, Dr. MANMOHAN Singh quoted Victor Hugo and said that, what had he said? I have forgotten now. He said that India, something like India's time has come now, something like that he said. I don't remember the exact word right now. Okay, so this is how economic reforms. And the next day, what you are waiting for? You are waiting for how the press will react, how the people will react. And people were euphoric about the reforms. Neither the Prime Minister nor the Finance Minister could imagine that people will actually support the economic reforms and the budget. The media supported even more. Media will anyhow support, because media anyhow part of the capitalist forces. So it was supported by media, and public opinion was also in favor. But some opposition came from poor states. Some opposition from, of course, West Bengal से आएगा, लेफ्ट की वजह से. उड़ीसा, वेस्ट बंगाल से भी उतना नहीं आया, उड़ीसा से और बिहार से ज्यादा आएगा. Bihar, Orissa, and MP, there was more opposition from these three states. Orissa, Bihar, and MP. Some opposition also came from the left parties. Also mention this, some opposition came from left parties. I think BJP supported Narasimha Rao, or maybe they had an understanding or what. BJP was not very, because BJP's policy is also the business trading class, they also are on that, no? So that will help them as well. Though they will talk a lot about it, there's a contradiction in BJP's economic idea though. They on one hand they talk about Swadeshi, right? That is economic nationalism. Because उधर भी तो nationalism बोलना होगा ना. तो economic nationalism is social, is Swadeshi. On the other side, they will support the business class, the trading class. So rather BJP, then if you mix these two ideas, it will be like within the country you do all the reforms, but don't open the economy outside. This would be their stand now. Like, but if you will not ask for FDI and all, then your economy will not rise. You don't need investment, right? And Narasimha Rao, wherever he will go, whichever country he will go, everywhere in every speech, he will talk about FDI. Every speech is talking about FDI, FDI, nothing else. Just foreign direct investment. And he brought a lot of foreign direct investment in India's forex reserves. Rose afterwards. That was a crisis. So this was like very interesting. 1991 to 1996. But 1994 के बाद फिर economic reforms will slowly, अब जैसे जैसे election आएगा पास तो government cannot take strong stand. ठीक है, so a little more I have to discuss in this. We will discuss it in the next class. Okay.